And Ralphie, the fallout from the Eagles skipper's injury over in the West?
So Oscar Allen's contract scenario is almost the saddest story in football. He's desperate to play for the club that he's a co-captain of. He's desperate for the club to get within a bull's roar of those offers from clubs like Brisbane. They're just not interested. They know that they need that pick 2 as a free agency compensation selection. Now, it was a bizarre scene in the Optus Stadium stands on Sunday. Andrew Dillon, the AFL CEO, was there. So were the Eagles power brokers and board members who were ashen-faced as he limped off. Was it an Achilles? Was it an ACL? It is a plantaris concern, a calf tendon injury. It will not keep him out for the season. So at the start of the year, he was looking for a deal of about 6 years at $1 million if he was to move elsewhere. That was probably fair given that market for key position free agency forwards. Even Brisbane would need to offer him something like 6 years at $800,000 plus to trigger first-round compensation for his current club. That's the way it would work. Guys, do you think it's beware for Brisbane? Has their risk profile shifted given those injuries? It's a lot of money for an injury-prone player.
It's the years for me, like 6 at 800. I know
he's 26, isn't he? So he's not young.
What's his year look like? What's his last 2 or 3 years look like?
How many would you give him? Clearly he's injury riddled. If you're Brisbane right now and you want to get Oscar Allen, how many years?
If you're going to do 6 at 800, that's $5 million that you're committing to, near enough, that you're committing to in your salary cap.
So what do you think's fair then?
You need to have a minute, like if you don't play a certain amount of games in the first 2 years, well then the rest of the deal is null and void. It's irresponsible. It would be irresponsible for anyone to offer anything over a 2 or 3 year deal at anything over 700 at the moment, 750, because the position that Oscar Allen's in is having to prove to his club, whether it's West Coast or another club that comes to him, that he is robust enough physically. It doesn't matter how good you've been or how good you could be, you've still got to show that you can actually do the work to get up and about, and right now he hasn't.
Do you think Brisbane does Brisbane look at all, their medical staff have been fantastic the last few years. They go back to the well, I think, Jay Dano was in a similar boat. He was full of injuries at Essendon.
They might, but if you want to take that risk, you need to understand the downside. Now, if you're going to make decisions on downside, you probably never do anything.
Nah.
So you've got to be optimistic and you've got to believe in your system to be able to help players come to hand. But numbers like 6 at 800, that's irresponsible in my view.
Well, it's not the only fallout from the game yesterday between Carlton and the West Coast, and that was the first quarter. And we don't often hear senior coaches speak so truthfully, and that's exactly what Andrew McQualter did at quarter time to Fox's Kath Lachlan.
Andrew, what was the gist of your quarter time message?
We're pathetic in the contest.
Well, it's pretty matter of fact.
Kath didn't have another question.
Kath did not have another one in the chamber. Caught her off guard as well. But if you look at some of these efforts from predominantly senior players, Geordie, it is the truth.
And that's the worry. I think when you're a new coach, a first-time coach like Andrew McQualter is, you are relying on your leaders to show the way for all these young kids coming through, and that is first and foremost the competitive nature in which they play. And I thought Graham and Baker have been fantastic. So they are two players that can really hold their head up high. But the core group of senior players that have been there for a long time under Adam Simpson should have been refreshed when Andrew McQualter comes over. But they have been anything less. I still remember the
refreshed as in
a new coach, a new voice.
They should have more vibrancy about them.
Re-energise and really try and promote this group. And we still, on countless occasions, I remember gather-round we showed vision of Tim Kelly and Liam Duggan.
10 touches, no tackles yesterday for Tim Kelly.
Yeah, which is just...
Look at that. You'd expect one or two of those boys to be in the top 100.
But there's
some names there.
That's what happens when you've got fat cats, you know. They're getting good money regardless of what they do. And you've got to... clubs have got to think long and hard about who they give guaranteed contracts to. Because you give a guaranteed contract to a player, you've got to know that he's not motivated by money. And I'm not saying they are, but right now their effort and their application is inconsistent.
It's a big thing to say, though, fat cats, and you could argue that's been a problem since the 2018 grand final.
For a while. It's been going for a while, and in the end, you know, when you've got a first quarter performance like that, if you can't get the right level of effort or energy, it's really hard to assess the rest of you. How do you assess the back six of the Eagles in that first quarter?
Well, you can't.
Almost impossible to do it because you've got no pressure on ball at all.
Even more of an indictment when Tom McCarthy comes in. He's been in the club for 10 days. So the recruit he was playing at Highton last year in Melbourne. Played at Richmond at the start of the year, comes in and has over 30. So third player on record to have over 30 possessions and 500 metres gained on debut. That's of any team in the competition. So he showed up some of his senior teammates, and 93% he went at as well. Geez, he had good skills, especially by foot. It was impressive.
So whatever the opposite of a fat cat, that's it. Like a young,
hungry
hungry player.
What would you do? What would you do with those players that we've flushed up? What's the balance there?
I don't know what else Mini can do, to be honest. He's moved players around. Players have been dropped. Yeah. Players have been counselled. They've been moved out of position. They've been asked for more. In the end, the individual has to decide that that the purpose and the reason for him fronting up to prepare first and then to perform is enough to spend this time and energy on. But when you're getting rewarded, regardless of the energy and the time that you put in, well, then that creates a problem.
Oh, there you go.
Well, let's head to another.
Pathetic and fat cat, all in the space of 24 hours. There you go. There's a bit of motivation. You expect a response this week, wouldn't you?
We do expect a response. And a home game over in the West, and it wasn't the West Coast and it wasn't the Fremantle Dockers. It was the North Melbourne Football Club who went down to the Fremantle Dockers in under a goal. But I look at the last 2 weeks from a North Melbourne point of view, and it ticks so many boxes for me. So there's the financial lure of playing 2 games that was destined for Tasmania now in the West. Won at Bunbury last week with a win, and then obviously a really good performance against Fremantle at Optus Oval. And so the financial lure is a tick, and I think it left us with questions about what's it going to do for their performance. And I couldn't be more happier with what North Melbourne have done. And I look at that and I think this is the building block for North Melbourne's ascension back up the AFL ladder. Off the back of a performance.
In what sense?
And I think that this is going to be the glue for this football club. This is a whole football club, not just the playing list that went over there. Guys took their families, they had coteries go over, they had player sponsors, they had members go over there, they had the board go over there as well. And they did this as a unit. And I think under the Alistair Clarkson regime, the last week and a half for North Melbourne might just be the most important for the next 5 years and what it could do for them.
So you know Clarko pretty well. I've been led to believe that North Melbourne, past players were brought in, Danny Laby was brought in, obviously Adam Simpson, and that there was a cultural piece for everyone that was over there in that period. And you know Clarko in this mode. Is this him at his best when he starts talking big picture and celebrating the past and selling that to what you could mean to future generations?
Yeah. It took me back to Kokoda. We were drafted 2 weeks in and we are on the Kokoda trek. So we are there as a group and as a unit with no distractions. So this, I think you're right. And you are relying on the game to be competitive, which you're right. That was a big tick. But even speaking to staff members that were over there, it was the greatest 2 weeks of their footballing life when they've been involved at North Melbourne. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
And they're starting to stand for something on the field. So last 6 weeks, starting to be harder to play against. So teams are moving the ball against them far too easily. We saw that blowout against Carlton, which ironically that's their opponent this Saturday at the MCG. But since that game, shown a lot more starch, haven't they? So you look at that, their ability to, obviously points against, they've been able to get to midfield in the table. Defensive 50 to inside 50 against. So that's when obviously the opposition starts from their defensive 50 and moves the ball.
That's good.
They're number 3 in the competition.
And that's not North Melbourne that we've seen under Clarkson prior to this.
Their teams have been able to move the ball far too easily. So that'll be good. That's why I'm really looking forward to Saturday. Like, there could be an upset brewing. Not that Carlton's knocking it out of the park, but that's going to be a good game if they can recover well from their Perth trip.
Yeah, that was without comment, and it was also against a side that we think's been travelling pretty well in Fremantle. Yeah. But you're right, the bookend. So Good Friday was a disaster.
Yeah.
And now they come up, 8 weeks later, and they get a chance to let's see what progress we've made in that 8 weeks.